Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
We're still at a place where AI is really only good at very, very narrow tasks.
Yes.
And, I think when we see things that look a lot more advanced, what we're actually observing are a number of very narrow focused AI models working in union together, or you may have 10 different AI models that are being used as inputs for another AI model. It's really common to have a pipeline approach where the output of one AI goes into the input of another one, and then that output goes into another one, and it's routed almost like a tree.
I see.
And so the most advanced AI you see tends to be a orchestration of a lot of very narrow focused AI models being triggered by upstream decisions that were made by another model. But in general, we still see a large amount of AI being delivered that has a human component to it behind the scenes.
Exactly. And so whether people are afraid of AI or not, or they think robots are going to take over the world, we're nowhere near. Even if AI and robots are going to take over the world at some point, it's not happening anytime soon, right? It's just not there. It's not developed nearly enough, correct?
I think that tends to be where I land. I think as brilliant as I do think Elon Musk is, I think he's a little, I think he's too excited about it.
I agree. Well, the other reason that I agree with that is because, and he would probably disagree, or maybe not agree, maybe just because he hasn't, wouldn't maybe believe some of the same things that I would. But I also, when I think about robots and AI taking over the world, I'm not that concerned about it, partly because robots don't have a depraved heart. Humans do. So why would a robot, for example, always assume the worst? Why would they always do the worst? Why would they always cause the most destruction? You know what I mean? Like, if they're programmed by evil people to take over the world, then they're going to go do what they're programmed for. But programming aside, here's a human, here's a robot. Human, depraved, totally, from birth.
Right.
Born with a sin nature, okay?
Sure.
This little human, until God saves him, is opposed to God, opposed to beauty, is self-destructive, sinful little depraved human being. A robot is not necessarily. They just do what they're programmed for.
Sure, but I think if we reached a level where AI was actually able to have independent thoughts and evaluations of scenarios, if you wanted to take a kind of techno-religious approach to it, what I would say is the fact that they're not evil is exactly why I think a lot of movies that show robots eradicating humans are actually inclined to do exactly that. And I think it's because they aren't bent towards evil. They're actually bent towards good. And so if that's true, what do you do to a virus?
Take it out.
And there is no other way to describe...
Basically take the people out, you mean?
Well, there is no other way to describe the human race on the earth other than a virus if you're an AI that is oriented towards good. All we do is consume, destroy, and serve our own selfish desires above all else.
Yep.
And so if if your task as an AI was to make the world good, right? To me, there's an interesting parallel with God's righteousness there.
Yep.
Because that is also how the Lord would handle these matters too, if it weren't for Christ and His ultimate plan.
Yeah, good point.
Right, so that's an interesting parallel to me if we think about Christianity from that standpoint.
That is fascinating.
Is that AI almost takes the role of the Lord in that way, where there is no tolerance for just pointless, self-destructive.
Right. That's
behavior.
Interesting. But don't you think part of it too is, how like any great movie, it follows basically a storyline that you see in the Bible. Good, evil happens, something needs to fix it. A good ending. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
Any good story has these basic components that you see in the gospel, you see in the Bible.
Sure.
And how much of the artificial intelligence stuff is just, here's a storyline of well, this could happen and that could happen. I don't know. It remains to be seen. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is there's a part of us that wants this unknown thing to get powerful, and is the human race going to beat it, or are we going to succumb to it? And we don't know. Right now, that's AI and robots.
Sure.
But this has always been the case. There's always been the case of like, there's almost a hunger and need for, we need confrontation. We need a war to fight. We need the question of whether we're going to win the war or not. And then hopefully we do. And then now we have this outcome. We have this resolution. You know what I mean? I think people almost like yearn for that deep down. But we see that, you know, obviously in the gospel and good. I mean, here's the thing with robots and AI. God's going to triumph in the end.
Sure.
That we know. But the other thing about Musk is Elon Musk. I mean, he's mentioned multiple times, and I assume he still sort of wonders this or believes this, like that we're in a simulation. You know, everything's a simulation. But here's the thing, dude. He's probably more right than some people.
I mean,
you know what I mean? He's not totally wrong.
I imagine that if you put a bunch of people together on a stage and ask them to defend that position, Elon would probably have the most compelling argument for it of kind of mainstream, you know, pop thinkers, if we want to think about it that way. That being said, Judea Pearl released a book a couple years ago called The Book of Why. And he actually, I think it was the mid 80s, he actually invented the technology that actually predecesses neural networks, which is what most modern AI is built on today. And he actually invented the concept of a Bayesian network, which was the predecessor. And the Book of Why covers essentially why he feels like we're still a very, very long way off from self-aware AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely encourage anyone to read it. It's not super math heavy. It's not tech heavy. There's a little bit of it just so you can try to track with them, but a lot of it has to do with how humans think versus how computers think, even the most advanced AI in the world. And I think it's really illuminating to the conversation because A, as experts go, he's one of the foremost, and B, one of the things he highlights that I think is so fascinating to really consider is that AI cannot imagine a world that doesn't exist. It can't.
AI cannot imagine a world that doesn't exist.
A human can look at a field and imagine a reality that doesn't exist, and it can desire even
right.
It can desire for there to be a house or a horse farm or you know, a new Dave Ramsey complex off of the interstate. But AI at this point is not there, and I think there's an enormous gap still.
Yes.
For a machine to look at, and sure, we have some examples of AI looking at a bunch of data and then creating something that hasn't been seen before, or
right.
Like, you know, one of the more fascinating ones is this specific type of AI called a GAN. Took in tons and tons of photos of people's faces, and then it was asked to generate a face that didn't exist, and it did, and it's amazing. It's the most convincing portrait of a person's face you could imagine. There's nothing about it with its best results that would not convince you it's a real person.
Mm-hmm.
But to ask any AI right now, imagine a world that no one's seen or comprehended yet. Imagine for me Anaheim, California in the 50s, and imagine a world there where there's an amusement park that has a castle and rides and all the families there, you know, and you start thinking through all the vivid colors and the smells and like the actual inventive, creative process that the human mind can do.
Mm-hmm.
There is an enormous leap between asking a computer, is this a hot dog or not? And asking it to imagine a world that doesn't exist.